The unbroken promise. A cruel vow. A deadly silence takes over the Château de la Roche. 400 guests hold their breath as Charlotte Dubois, radiant in her French lace gown, extends a trembling hand to receive the wedding ring. Elias Sinclair, heir to a billionaire empire, holds the diamond ring as if it were poison. His dark eyes pierce through her like blades of ice. Then, in front of all the Parisian elite, his voice echoes, cruel and relentless, through the golden halls. I will never love you, Charlotte. This contract is just to save your family from total ruin. Don't delude yourself into thinking this is a fairy tale. The ring falls onto the marble with a metallic clang. Silent tears stream down her face. No one in the hall can breathe. But behind that calculated cruelty, something is hidden in Elias's eyes. Something he doesn't even understand himself. A love story is about to be born from the ashes of the deepest humiliation. The aroma of white roses and Dom Perignon champagne should have created the perfect atmosphere for the wedding of the century. Instead, the air in the Château de la Roche was thick with tension, as if a storm were approaching the golden hills of Bordeaux. Charlotte Dubois adjusted the pearls around her neck with fingers that trembled imperceptibly. The Venetian mirror reflected a bride of ethereal beauty, with golden brown hair pulled back in an elegant bun, skin like porcelain, and green eyes that shone with contained tears. The Alençon lace gown, an exclusive creation by Maison Chanel, hugged her curves like a second skin, but she felt like a doll dressed for a sacrificial ritual. "Mademoiselle, it's time," murmured the lady-in-waiting, avoiding the bride's gaze. Through the windows of the bridal suite, Charlotte could see the perfectly manicured French gardens, where 400 guests waited under white silk marquees. The European elite had gathered to witness the union between the ruined daughter of the Dubois family and the relentless heir of the Sinclair Empire. Swiss bankers conversed with Italian duchesses, while Russian magnates toasted with Baccarat crystal. But Charlotte knew the truth behind all that ostentation. She was not a bride. She was a bargaining chip. 3 months earlier, when creditors knocked on the door of the Château Dubois, her father had begged on his knees. The debt of 30 million euros had swallowed not only the family's fortune, but also the dignity of generations of French aristocrats. Elias Sinclair appeared as a dark savior, offering the full payment of the debts in exchange for something he considered even more valuable, a wife of noble lineage to legitimize his new money. "He is a cold man, ma chérie," her mother, Madame Dubois, had whispered days earlier, "but perhaps you can awaken his heart." Charlotte descended the Carrara marble staircase as if walking to her own execution. The chateau's halls echoed with the expectant murmur of the guests. Bohemian crystal chandeliers cast golden rainbows over paintings by French masters, while arrangements of white peonies perfumed the air with an almost suffocating sweetness. At the entrance to the main hall, she paused. Through the double doors of carved oak, she could see Elias Sinclair waiting at the makeshift altar in front of the ancestral stone fireplace. Even from a distance, his presence dominated the environment. 1 meter and 90 centimeters tall, broad shoulders under a perfectly cut Armani tuxedo, black hair combed back, revealing an aristocratic forehead. At 35, he was considered one of the most desired men in Europe, but also one of the most ruthless. The doors opened, and the string quartet began Mendelssohn's Wedding March. Charlotte forced a radiant smile and began to walk down the aisle of rose petals, feeling the weight of 400 pairs of eyes on her. Courteous whispers echoed in French, English, and Italian. "She is even more beautiful than in the magazines. Poor child. She doesn't know what she's getting into. Sinclair has destroyed men stronger than her. Each step on the ancestral Persian carpet brought her closer to Elias, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze piercing her soul. There was no warmth in those bitter, chocolate-colored eyes, only cold calculation and something that seemed almost like contempt. When she finally reached the altar, he did not extend his hand to help her up the 2 marble steps. Instead, he watched her with the same expression he would use to evaluate a racehorse at auction. Father Michel, a friend of the Sinclair family for decades, began the ceremony in a solemn voice. The sacred words echoed through the hall as Charlotte struggled to maintain her composure. When the time came for the rings, Elias took the diamond ring, a Cartier piece valued at 200,000 euros, and held it between his fingers as if weighing a decision. "Elias Sinclair," the priest said, "do you accept Charlotte Dubois as your wife, to love and respect her in wealth and in poverty, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Charlotte could hear her own heart beating like war drums. The guests leaned forward, expectant. Then Elias smiled. It was not a smile of happiness, but something cutting and cruel that transformed his aristocratic face into a mask of ice. "I do," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a sentence. "But let it be clear to all present." He raised his voice, ensuring that every word reached the farthest corners of the hall. The whispers ceased. Even the wind in the windows seemed to stop blowing. "I will never love you, Charlotte. This contract is just to save your family from total ruin. Don't delude yourself into thinking this is a fairy tale. You will be my wife only on paper, a beautiful doll for social events. Nothing more." The diamond ring slipped from his fingers and fell onto the marble with a metallic clang that reverberated through the deadly silence. 400 people watched, paralyzed, at the most public humiliation in French high society in decades. Tears welled up in Charlotte's green eyes, but she kept her chin up. In that moment of absolute devastation, something awakened within her. Not the fragility of a victim, but the ancestral strength of the Dubois women who had faced revolutions and wars. "I understand perfectly, Monsieur Sinclair," she replied, her voice crystalline, echoing with a dignity that surprised even herself. "But know that although I accepted this agreement to save my family, my heart remains my own. And one day you may discover that there are things in this world that your money cannot buy." She gracefully bent down, picked up the ring from the floor, and placed it on her own finger, without waiting for him to do it. The gesture was so elegant and defiant that a murmur of admiration ran through the crowd. Elias watched her with something new in his eyes. Surprise? Respect? Or perhaps just irritation that she had turned the tables on her own terms. "You may now kiss the bride," said Father Michel, clearly uncomfortable with the palpable tension. Elias approached, but the kiss was ceremonial, cold as the marble under their feet. Still, when his lips touched hers for those few seconds, Charlotte felt an electric current run down her spine and was sure that he felt it too. The applause was polite, but hesitant. Madame de Rothschild whispered something to the Countess of Polignac, while Lord Wellington shook his head in disapproval. The orchestra began a waltz, but the atmosphere remained charged. During the reception in the gardens, lit by thousands of golden lights, Charlotte smiled and greeted guests as if her world had not collapsed an hour earlier. Elias remained by her side, playing the role of a courteous husband for the cameras and curious glances, but whispering cutting comments whenever no one could hear them. "Your performance was convincing," he murmured, while they toasted with Krug champagne. "But don't forget, this is just theater." "Theater?" Charlotte tilted her head, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "Interesting, because from what I've observed today, You're also acting, Monsieur Sinclair. The question is, who is the real Elias behind this mask of cruelty? For the first time that day, he seemed genuinely disarmed. When the night came to an end, and the last guests left in their Rolls-Royces and Bentleys, Charlotte found herself alone in the chateau's master bedroom. Elias had made it clear that he would sleep in the office. Even on their honeymoon, he would keep his distance. She sat in front of the antique dressing table and removed the pearls one by one, watching her reflection in the mirror. The young woman who looked back was no longer the same one who had woken up that morning. Something had been born inside her during that public humiliation, a fierce determination she didn't even know she possessed. "You may have bought my name, Elias Sinclair," she whispered to the empty room. "But my heart is a prize you'll have to win, and something tells me this war is just beginning." Outside in the office windows, a light remained on until dawn. Elias Sinclair also couldn't sleep, tormented by something he couldn't name. Perhaps the echo of a dignity he didn't expect to find, or the first tremor in walls he had built to protect a heart that had once been broken. The early morning wind carried the scent of the Bordeaux vineyards, whispering promises of a story that was just beginning to unfold. We hope this story is captivating you. What do you think is driving Elias's coldness? And how will Charlotte fight back against the humiliation she suffered? Leave your comment below with your thoughts and predictions. A glimmer of hope. Paris shone like a diamond under the September sun. But Charlotte watched the city through the armored windows of the penthouse on Avenue Montaigne, as if she were contemplating a golden prison. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding, and she still felt like a stranger, wandering through the corridors of her own life. Elias's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a restored Haussmann building, with a panoramic view of the Eiffel Tower and the Champs-Élysées. Every detail screamed refined luxury. Calacatta marble floors, 18th century French furniture, works by Monet and Renoir on the walls, as if they were simple decorations. But all that beauty felt cold and soulless, just like her husband. Elias left for the office at 7 in the morning in his black Aston Martin DBS, and only returned after 11 at night, when she had already retreated to the guest room that had become her refuge. They shared the same roof, but lived like polite strangers, who occasionally crossed paths in the hallways. "Madame Sinclair," said Françoise, the 50-year-old housekeeper who ran the house with military efficiency. "The master left instructions for you to choose a personal trainer and a language teacher. He wishes you to improve yourself." Charlotte almost laughed at the irony. Elias wanted to mold her into his perfect version of a trophy wife, as if she were clay in the hands of an arrogant sculptor. "Tell my husband that I appreciate his consideration," she replied. "But I prefer to explore Paris on my own. I haven't set foot in this city for 3 years." The truth was that she needed to breathe, to feel that she still had some control over her own existence. She put on a nude Hermes outfit, one of the dozens of clothes that magically appeared in her closet after the wedding, and went out to walk the streets she once knew so well. The Paris of her childhood had been different. Then, she ran through the Trocadero gardens with other high society children, attended the best private schools, and dreamed of a brilliant future. Now, passing through Place Vendôme, every shop window of Cartier, Van Cleef, and Arpels reminded her that all the wealth around her had a price, and she was that price. It was in a small bookstore on the left bank that she found refuge. Among shelves of antique books and the scent of aged paper, Charlotte could pretend that she was just a young Parisian woman in search of a good story. She chose a copy of Pride and Prejudice, ironic considering her own situation, and settled into a burgundy velvet armchair near the window. "Excuse me," a male voice said in French. "You're Charlotte Sinclair, aren't you?" She looked up and saw a man of about 40, with brown hair and gray strands at his temples and kind blue eyes. There was something familiar about his face, but she couldn't identify what. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Pierre Dubois," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm a doctor at St. Louis Hospital. I met Elias many years ago." The name awakened a vague memory. She had heard Elias mention that name on the phone, always with a different, less cold, more human tone. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Dubois." "Pierre, please." He hesitated, as if debating internally. "Forgive my rudeness, but how are you? I know the wedding was intense." The unexpected kindness almost made her fall apart. For 3 weeks, no one had asked how she really was. Everyone assumed she must be ecstatic to have married one of the richest men in France. "I'm adapting," she replied diplomatically. Pierre studied her face with the sharp perception of a doctor accustomed to reading between the lines. "Elias wasn't always like this," he said softly. "The man you met at the altar is not who he really is. Or rather, he's not who he used to be." "What do you mean?" 5 years ago, he lost someone very important. Since then," Pierre shook his head, "he's built walls so high that sometimes I wonder if he even remembers what he was like before." Before Charlotte could ask more questions, Pierre's phone rang. It was an emergency at the hospital. He said goodbye quickly, but not before leaving her with something that intrigued her deeply. "Charlotte, I know you don't know me, but can I give you some advice? Don't give up on him yet. Behind all that coldness, there is a man who once knew how to love with an intensity that scared everyone who knew him. Maybe you're the only person who can remind him of that." Back at the penthouse, Charlotte found Elias in his office, working even though it was a Saturday afternoon. Through the ajar door, she could see him hunched over contracts, his back muscles tense under a white linen shirt. For a moment, she hesitated. Pierre's words echoed in her mind. She knocked gently on the door. "Come in," he said, without looking up from his papers. "Elias, I'd like to talk to you. If it's about money for shopping, talk to Françoise. She has access to the card I set aside for your expenses." "It's not about money." Charlotte entered the office, noticing the details for the first time. Dark wood-paneled walls, a 19th century mahogany desk, shelves filled with corporate law books and, curiously, some volumes of French poetry. He finally looked up, and she was surprised to notice the dark shadows under his eyes. When was the last time he had slept properly? Then what is it about? "It's about us, about this marriage. I know you made your expectations clear, but I have some too." Elias leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms. The golden light of the late afternoon fell on his face, softening the harsh lines around his eyes. "I'm listening." "I want to work. I have a degree in art history from the Sorbonne and experience in curation. I can't just be a costly ornament here." "Absolutely not." The answer was immediate and categorical. "My wife doesn't need to work. It would be embarrassing for my reputation." "Your reputation?" Charlotte's voice rose an octave. "What about my dignity? My sanity? Or does that not matter as long as I smile nicely at your business parties?" Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or something deeper. "You don't understand the world you live in now, Charlotte. There are rules, expectations. My first wife." He stopped abruptly, as if he had revealed something he didn't intend to. "Your first wife?" Charlotte's heart raced. No one had mentioned that he had been married before. Elias got up abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the Seine. For long minutes he stood in silence, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tense. "She died," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. "In a car accident. when she was returning from an art exhibition that I had forbidden her to organize. If she had stayed home that night. The pain in his voice was so real, so raw, that Charlotte's chest tightened. Without thinking, she approached and lightly touched his arm. "Elias, He pulled away, as if her touch burned him. "No." His voice returned to its icy tone. "I don't want your pity, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes Isabel made. You will stay at home, safe, and that is my last word on the matter." He left the office, leaving Charlotte alone in the shadows of the night. But now she understood something fundamental. Elias's cruelty was not born of malice, but of a pain so deep that he had chosen coldness as his only form of protection. That night, she dined alone in the formal dining room, under the gaze of ancestral Sinclair portraits. The silence was broken only by the delicate clinking of the Limoges porcelain and the distant sound of Parisian traffic 15 floors below. At 11:30 at night, she heard the key in the lock. Elias had returned, as always, when he thought she would be sleeping. But this time, Charlotte waited in the hallway. "Good evening," she said softly when he passed. He stopped, surprised to find her awake. "Why aren't you sleeping?" "I was thinking about Isabel." The name of his first wife hit him like a punch, his muscles visibly tensed. "Don't say that name." Was she also a golden prisoner in this beautiful cage? Charlotte kept her voice gentle, without accusation. Or did you really love her before you decided that loving hurts too much? For a moment that lasted an eternity, they looked at each other in the dimly lit hallway. Charlotte could see the battle being fought on his face, between the man he was and the man he had chosen to become. "Good night, Charlotte," he said finally, but his voice had lost its usual harshness. As she watched him disappear down the hallway, Charlotte knew that she had found the first crack in Elias Sinclair's impenetrable armor. And as painful as it was, she was determined to discover what man was hiding behind so much fear and coldness. The war between them had officially begun, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that they would both come out victorious in the end. This is a pivotal moment in the story. Do you believe that Charlotte can heal Elias's wounds? How will she change him? Leave a comment below with your thoughts and predictions. The second chance. A year later, the Château de la Roche was unrecognizable. The same golden halls that had witnessed humiliation and coldness now shone with a different light. The light of true love that had blossomed against all odds. Charlotte woke up in the master suite, no longer in the guest room, with the September sun filtering through the French silk curtains. By her side, Elias was sleeping with an expression of peace she had learned to love in recent months. His dark hair fell over his forehead, and she resisted the urge to brush it away with her fingers. Today would be the day of their vow renewal, an intimate ceremony that had been his idea, not hers. "I want to erase those cruel words," he had said 2 weeks earlier, holding her against his chest after they made love in the Parisian penthouse. "I want the world to know that you are not just my wife on paper. You are the woman who brought my heart back to life." Elias's transformation in recent months had been gradual, but profound. The man who once forbade everything out of fear had become her biggest supporter when she opened her own art gallery in Montmartre. He attended every opening, proud and protective, but without ever trying to control her decisions. "Good morning, my star," his husky voice murmured against her neck. "Good morning, my heart," she replied, turning to meet his eyes. They had developed this morning ritual, small declarations of love that healed a little more of the old wounds each day. Nervous. "Should I be?" Charlotte traced lazy circles on his bare chest. "After all, I've been married to you for a year, but today is different." Elias captured her hand and kissed it softly. Today is when we choose each other, for real. They had breakfast on the terrace that overlooked the gardens, where a small crew was preparing the setting for the ceremony. Only 20 people had been invited, close family and true friends. Pierre Dubois would be the best man, honoring the friendship that had helped Elias find his way back to the light. "Madame," Françoise interrupted, now with a genuine smile on her face, a dramatic change from the tense first months. "A special delivery has arrived for you." It was a navy blue velvet box with the Cartier emblem. Inside, a set of sapphires and diamonds rested that took Charlotte's breath away. A necklace, earrings, and bracelet that seemed to have captured pieces of the night sky. "These are the jewels that belonged to my grandmother," Elias explained, watching her reaction. "She wore them to her own wedding to my grandfather in 1945, right after the liberation of Paris. They were the only jewels that survived the war, hidden throughout the German occupation." Charlotte touched the precious stones with reverence. It wasn't just the monetary value that impressed her, but the emotional weight. He was sharing family history, traditions, the legacy of the Sinclairs that she was now truly a part of. "They're beautiful, but... At our first wedding, I wore my family's pearls. Today, I want to wear something that symbolizes our new beginning, not the past." Elias smiled, that rare and devastating smile that completely transformed his face. "Then wear this." He pulled a smaller box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate choker of white and yellow diamonds. Simple, but elegant. "I had it made especially for today. The yellow diamonds came from a mine in South Africa that I just acquired. It's our first acquisition as a couple. Ours? Half of the company is yours now, officially. I want you to be my partner in everything. Business, life, dreams." He paused, vulnerable. "If you want." In response, she kissed him with all the passion she felt right there on the terrace, not caring that the employees might see them. In the afternoon, Charlotte got dressed in the same room where she had cried tears of humiliation a year earlier. But this time, every gesture was an act of self-love and conscious choice. The dress was a champagne silk creation by Valentino. Simple yet elegant, it flowed like golden water around her body. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and Elias's diamonds captured the light like stars trapped on her throat. When she descended the staircase this time, there was no fear in her steps. Elias was waiting for her in the same place where he had uttered cruel words 12 months earlier, but now his eyes shone with an emotion she knew well. Deep, true, unconditional love. The guests were few but significant. Her parents, who had recovered not only financial stability, but also their dignity. Elias's sister Celeste, who had become her best friend. Pierre and his wife, Marie, and some close friends who had witnessed the couple's transformation. "My dears," Pierre began, who had offered to officiate the ceremony. "We are here today to celebrate not only the renewal of marriage vows, but the birth of true love between two souls who found in each other the cure for old wounds." Elias took Charlotte's hands, and she felt the slight trembling in his fingers. Nervousness, emotion, or perhaps just the magnitude of the moment. "Charlotte," he began, his voice choked. "A year ago, on these same stairs, I said words that I am deeply ashamed of. Words born of fear, pain, and the cowardice of a man who had forgotten how to love without fear of losing." Tears began to well up in the guests' eyes, but Charlotte kept her gaze fixed on her husband, drinking in every word like nectar. "You taught me that loving is not a weakness, but the greatest courage anyone can have. You taught me that honoring the past doesn't mean living trapped in it. and you taught me that some miracles are worth all the risks." He knelt down. The proud Elias Sinclair knelt in front of everyone present and pulled a new ring from his pocket. It was a platinum band, engraved with a line of Clair de Lune in musical notation. "So I ask you again in front of everyone we love, Charlotte Beaumont. Sinclair, do you accept to be my wife for real? Do you accept that I love you with all the intensity I am capable of? Do you accept to build with me not just a marriage, but a life full of shared dreams?" "I do," she whispered, her voice broken with emotion. "But only if you promise one thing." "Anything. Promise that you'll stop punishing yourself for the past and allow yourself to be happy with us, with our family that is to come." Elias's eyes widened. "Family that is to come?" Charlotte smiled through her tears and placed her hand on her still flat stomach. 8 weeks, she whispered. "I was going to tell you after the ceremony, but I couldn't wait." The silence that followed was completely different from the one a year ago. This time, it was the silence of absolute joy, of love that overflows and finds no words to express itself. Elias slowly stood up, took her face in his hands, and kissed her with a tenderness that made everyone present cry openly. When they separated, he rested his forehead on hers. "I love you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I love your strength, your beauty, your courage to love me even when I didn't deserve it. And I love the miracle you're carrying." "And I love you," she replied, "exactly as you are. Scars, fears, and all the beauty you hide from the world." As they exchanged the new rings, the sun set over the vineyards of Bordeaux, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that rivaled the best impressionist paintings. The chamber orchestra began a waltz, and for the first time, Elias and Charlotte danced like true lovers, lost in each other's eyes. "You know what's ironic?" Charlotte murmured as they spun on the marble terrace. "What?" "A year ago you said this wasn't a fairy tale." Elias laughed, a genuine, young, liberated laugh. "And I was right. This is much better than any fairy tale. This is real." Later, when the guests left, and they were alone under the September stars, Elias took Charlotte to the same place where the ring had fallen to the floor a year earlier. "I have a confession," he said, pulling her closer. "What?" "That day, when I said I would never love you, a part of me already knew I was lying." "What do you mean?" "Because in that moment, when you lifted your chin and defied me with such dignity, something inside me recognized something inside you. My soul recognized your soul, and that terrified me more than any business or financial risk I had ever faced." Charlotte smiled, remembering the terrified young woman who had walked down that hallway 12 months earlier. "And now? Now I know that the biggest risk isn't loving," he whispered, placing his hand on her belly where a new Sinclair was growing. "The biggest risk is wasting a single day without telling you how much I love you." They remained embraced under the French moonlight, surrounded by the gardens where their stories had begun with pain and blossomed into true love. The wind carried the scent of roses and the promise of a future that finally seemed bright. Charlotte had entered that chateau as a desperate young woman, accepting a cruel agreement. Now, a year later, she was a fulfilled woman, deeply loved, and carrying the future of the Sinclair family in her womb. And Elias, the man who had sworn never to love again, discovered that some walls are built to be torn down by the right person, at the right time, with the right love. "Forever?" he asked, echoing the words he hadn't been able to say a year earlier. "Forever," she promised, sealing the pact with a kiss that tasted of redemption, hope, and all the happy endings that are worth waiting for. We hope you enjoyed this beautiful story of redemption. What do you think about Elias's transformation? And how will their family grow in the future? Leave a comment below with your thoughts.